Well, good morning, and welcome to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School and our class, Wisdom of the Soul. We're here every week, absolutely free. And I do want to remind myself to remind you to, anytime you check out this class on YouTube or listen to it as a podcast, if you would leave a little review and subscribe. That helps us a lot. In fact, we're at about 450 subscribers on YouTube, and when we hit 500, YouTube pushes it out and suggests to people who listen to similar programming that they might like the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. So that helps, the long and short of that, it helps other people find us. So if you've not yet done that, even if you don't, I'd appreciate it even if you are always listening live and you never have occasion to go to YouTube. If you could click subscribe on the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School channel, I'd really appreciate it. Just search in YouTube or in Google for that matter, Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. And so too in any podcatcher, any podcast app, Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. And if you can leave a review, wow, that's even better. And you don't have to lie or exaggerate, just a nice, sincere, how do you like the show? Or for that matter, my book, Fearless Intelligence. I think we're at 92 reviews of Fearless Intelligence, which may not sound like much, but actually, for a self-published book, that's pretty good. And uh, all but two of them are 5-star reviews, so it's a 4.9 star review on Amazon for the book Fearless Intelligence. I haven't mentioned it yet. I hesitate. I don't want to be like the cigarette smoker that tells everybody that he's going to quit as a way of pressuring himself to quit and then shames himself when he's unable to do it. But I really would like to write another book. And it's been, what, 3 or 4 years, yeah, maybe 5 years since Fearless Intelligence was published. And I have an idea for a book that I'm working on. So stand by for that. More about that in the future. Today we're going to talk about the shadow side. We're going to talk about, as we did in the newsletter, the difference between shadow and darkness. And as I said in the newsletter, in my show notes, it's a fine point, perhaps, but one that I want to make. And use it as an allegory for fear, ignorance, and evil. So my point, which I'll make at the top and then bear down on, is that evil exists. There is such a thing. But hold on, cowboy. It's not a force. It exists as an absence of goodness and truth and beauty. So the struggle with evil may be a mislabeling of the whole concept, and that's what I'd like to explore. Plus, shadow is an allegory throughout history. In the Star Wars movies, we talk about the dark side and suggest that that is a force. And it's an issue I have that I'd like to flesh out because I think we can prove logically that there is no such thing as a force that is dark or evil. That the universe is basically butterflies and rainbows and unicorns and chocolate. It's it's all good. Evil does exist. There's gross injustice. There's cruelty. No question about it. But why does it exist? And what is it really? So That's my topic today. I'm real excited about it because I think unmasking the truth about that which poses as evil and approaching it by discerning initially the difference between shadow and darkness and using that as an allegory, light and shadow or light and dark, for good and evil, will give us some insight that our ancestors perhaps did not have. It goes all the way back to Zoroastrianism and just the binary nature of the way people think. That if there is something good and then there's something that's not good, it must be an opposing force. Today we'll talk about an alternative to that view, which is that it's a polarity. It's a complement, that you can't have light without shadow. And the reason that divinity, a universe based on love, would not only tolerate evil, but rely on it. So these are big metaphysical thoughts, big challenging concepts that I look forward to tackling today, and hope we can generate some comment near the end of the class when we do the Q&A, or at least a few questions. It's a big relief. Imagine, can I bring you to an understanding that evil exists, but it is not a force, and that it is easily vanquished with goodness and love and truth and harmony, kindness, compassion, mercy. The ancients used to debate whether all souls are redeemable, or are some just a lost cause. I will even ask later today, as we talk about so-called hell and Satan or Lucifer, whoever or whatever that is. Does he run hell? Is he the CEO, or does he work for God? And is he confined to hell, or is he free to come and go as he pleases? And what is the devil's relationship with God? All of this a personification for good versus evil. But again, is it really a struggle? Are these opposing forces? Or is this a matter, like light and shadow, of something real that exists as an energy and something that exists only as the absence of that energy, but not any force unto itself? Let's tackle that head on. I'd like to begin, as we always do, with an opening meditation, opening focus. And I'd like to try something a little bit different today. It occurred to me this morning that I've never offered this idea to you. But you know the expression furrowed brow? And sometimes you'll actually notice this in other people. They seem in their forehead to have these wrinkles. And it's true that we tend to gather tension in the forehead. We really do. Sometimes when people think, they'll even put their finger on their forehead like this, or they'll touch their forehead. But to furrow your brow, to make an effort to think, of course, is a stress response, which undermines self-awareness and scatters our attention and makes it more difficult to focus, to reason. And of course, we're much less open to our intuition. So have you ever just massaged a little bit your forehead? I'd like to suggest you do that now. Just take the tips of your fingers, touch your forehead. Your eyes can be open or closed, and just make little circles, or at least rub up toward the top of your head from your eyebrows up, pushing up and away, pushing up and out, or make little circles, clockwise or counterclockwise. And as you do that, see if you can feel your forehead relaxing. If you do this in the morning when you first get up or in the evening, and you have a little lotion, a little body lotion, you can use that. It's much easier to do with a little lotion. But it feels wonderful, and you might be surprised how effective that can be. And then sort of bring that down on either side of your eyes. And then feel as you let go of your head, drop your hands. Close your eyes, do that now, and move your awareness to the space around your ears. And create and sense a feeling of letting go around your ears. And I think you might be surprised to find how much letting go you're able to feel around your ears as you relax your scalp. Like this whole cap of muscle we call the scalp carries tension. It's hard to believe, but when you feel that letting go, that sagging or drooping feeling around your ears, you may be surprised how much relaxation you feel across your entire head. Feel that letting go. And then silently and internally suggest to yourself that this is something that will be easy for you to remember and repeat throughout the day, especially if you have a problem or a heartache, a problem to be solved or a hurt to be healed. Turn your awareness to the space around your ears and feel that letting go. And feel that in the forehead, all across the top of your head, but your forehead as well, and your cheeks. And move that letting go feeling down to your jaws, your jaw, both sides of your jaws, and your tongue. Whether it seems that your tongue is laying on the floor of your mouth or touching the roof of your mouth or floating somewhere in between matters not. Just feel a letting go. And your lips. And I think you'll notice that as you let go of that subtle tension in your face, the most gentle little smile will occur, a gentle, ever so slight uplifting of the corners of your mouth. Not deliberately so, but as a result of letting go. A smile is a natural, relaxed position. It takes an effort to frown. Muscular tension is necessary to eliminate the natural, albeit subtle, and gentle little smile that goes with contentment, with a sense that everything is okay. And if your mind or your brain likes to argue with you and suggest everything is not okay, pretend it is. Ask yourself, what if it were? What if for the next 10 or 15 minutes, everything was just fine? Just pretend. What if everything, for now, It's just great. How would you feel? Are you willing to allow yourself to feel that good? To allow yourself to feel that much contentment? To be that okay with things? Perhaps even conjure up a feeling of gratitude for how well things are going in your life. They could be so much worse, right? No matter how much difficulty you may be experiencing, things could always be a lot worse, and they are for many people. So we can always find something to be grateful about, to be grateful for. And from there, see if you can move toward a reverence for life, a deep appreciation for how wonderful life is. And allow yourself effortlessly to review the goodness in life, in your life in particular. Those you love and care about. Usually, when we tell someone that we love them, or tell ourselves that we love this person or that person, what we're saying is that we love the way we feel when we're with them. Think about the way you feel when you're with someone you love and someone who loves you. Settle into that. Think about the beauty of nature, as we discussed in this class a couple of weeks ago, our class on eco spirituality. Think about the most beautiful visions, landscapes, and scenes that you've ever experienced. Not merely with your ability to visualize in the mind's eye, but to remember the sounds of that beauty. And the ambience, perhaps even the fragrance, the warmth of the sun, gentle breezes, perfumed with the fragrances of nature, far, far from the cities and the roads. And beyond beauty and gratitude, see whether you can open yourself to a sense of reverence, as if this is sacred beauty. as if this is a holy peace. As if this is a level of expanded awareness. As if peace is more than an absence of conflict and more than a quiet environment, but higher consciousness, seeing the bigger picture from an elevated perspective. As if the more you understand, the more you relax. And the more you relax, the more you understand. For just as trying too hard inhibits understanding and insight, stress and anxiety shatters awareness. Letting go, acknowledging beauty, gratitude, peace of mind, and a reverence for the harmony of all things expands your intelligence, your comprehension, your insight, and understanding. And if you haven't already, check to make sure this feeling has swept slowly down through your shoulders, your rib cage, your belly and abdomen, through your hips, all the way down through your legs to the floor, and feel grounded through your feet, through your legs, depending on how you sit. Grounded, connected, rooted into the earth, open and receptive, safe and relaxed, having created, nurtured, sustained a peace that reveals wisdom. An attitude, a level of awareness that encourages you to look at what you do not know and understand. Going beyond what you already know, and the self-satisfaction of knowing what you know and that you know it. And like a little child wandering the earth with an attitude of, oh boy, golly gee, lucky me. This is all so cool, so amazing. Become like little children, innocent, easily fascinated, eyes wide open, seeing everything as new again, indescribably beautiful, and ineffably part of one whole thing. For here we are free from conflict. All the pieces seem to fit together so perfectly. Beyond gratitude to reverence. Consider the paradox of the one and the many. That while we all share a common source, each of us as individuals in form are unique. We have fingerprint evidence and DNA proof of our individuality. There's never, ever been anyone quite like you. There is not now, nor will there ever be anyone packaged with your gifts and talents, your abilities, and even your interests are yours. And like a grand jigsaw puzzle, every piece is unique and they all fit together. They just need to be sorted out. We need to find our place in the puzzle. And if we don't fit here and we don't fit there, keep looking for somewhere. It's guaranteed you will fit perfectly. You're here for a reason. Exactly who you are as you are, with your gifts and your challenges. There's something we're supposed to realize and accomplish that no one else can do for us. And there's a larger mission that we can do together in groups of twos and threes and thousands and millions. But each of us in form, incarnate, are unique. All from the same source, ultimately one thing, and yet unique. With a mission, a reason to be, a purpose. Reinforce your commitment to self-discovery and self-development. For if not you, who could possibly do that for you? I think it was Oscar Wilde who said or wrote, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." Accept yourself. Of course you're a little quirky. Of course there are times when you feel misunderstood, times when you don't understand yourself. It's part of the adventure. That's what keeps us from being bored. It's a little discomfort here and there that urges us forward. Unfolding like a flower blossoms. Blossoming while reaching for the sun, stretching for the source, tracking it across the sky. To know yourself, understand yourself, accept yourself, and include yourself in the reverence that you have for all that exists. Remind yourself of the value of bringing this sense of reverence with you back to the waking state. See how long you can carry that into your day, into your evening, this evening, into your sleep, into the day tomorrow. How long can you gently hold in the palm of your hand, as if very, very fragile, this sense of reverence, the opportunity that life represents, before you get confused and anxious, fearful, sad, worried about all the things you do not know, obsessing on what you do not know. I found this on the web. And forgetting all that you do. And so bring this with you simply by forming the intention. As we reorient ourselves toward the waking state, form the intention to rise, to feel a gentle floating upward, a kind of a lifting, a floating up, like awakening in the morning. And 3, eyes open, wide awake. Open your eyes now, wide awake, back in the room, feeling fine, feeling better than before, rested and relaxed and filled with reverence. It's a nice word, isn't it? Much is made of gratitude. Keep a gratitude journal. Write down all that you have to be grateful for. I think that's a great idea. I've been thinking about the word reverence lately. I thought I'd share that with you today. All right, now let's pivot on our heels and take a look at the shadow, the dark side, the nature of evil. I hate to use the word wickedness because it really defames the Wiccans. Wicca or Wiccans are pantheists, or people that worship the divine through nature. And you know, they practice certain magic and potions and pills, but they're healers. And to create this archetype, which Hollywood has really done a great job of creating this image of the wicked witch, with the black hat and the cone. The cone hat is interesting. Excuse me. The hat, the cone hat that the witch wears is really a dunce cap, isn't it? If you think of the wizard, also a wizard will have a similar cap in certain drawings and illustrations and such. Excuse me. That'll clear my throat a little bit here. Hmm. Have you ever thought about that? How a wizard's hat or a witch's hat is the same as a dunce cap. And the fact that it's triangular, that it points up, is a suggestion that something about the hat could bring wisdom down or could connect us, in a sense, to our overshadowing soul. That's the whole idea. It's sort of like the allegory of the pendulum, which swings at the base, representing the flux and the change of life. But the paradox of the pendulum, of course, is at the very top. All of this movement is flowing out of a point that is fixed and unmoving, and that would represent divinity. So the idea that God is above us in the sky, a sky god, is an ancient concept, given what we know about the universe, about our galaxy, the size of the universe, the nature of the universe. Ultimately, there is no up or down or left or right. There's no north or south. All of these are relative concepts. So there is no above or below. Even the idea that outer space is somewhere else is sort of silly if you think about it. Or speed. Speed through space. How fast is that rocket going? How fast is that rocket to Mars? Well, speed loses its meaning without some uh, object. It's all relative. Speed is relative to a particular object. So if you're in deep interstellar space between galaxies in some huge void, it's easy to recognize that there is no speed. It's just total arbitrary convention. Not to get too far afield, wicked comes from this Christianization of the occult. Even the occult, which simply means hidden, is typically portrayed as evil. And so the witch is evil. Of course, there are some stories, Wizard of Oz, we had a couple of bad witches. We had a couple of good witches. Glenda was a good witch, right? So I think that probably upset some of the more rigid, dogmatic Christians, and others too. Concepts of evil exist in all religions and philosophies. But what I want to point out today, what I want to help develop, and the great psychoanalyst Carl Jung writes about this also, the shadow side in human beings. The shadow, according to Jung, the dark side in each of us, is simply the ego. It's the persona nature. It's what in Sanskrit is called the jiva nature. It's the unenlightened view that we are the container in which we dwell. To believe you are your ego or your personality, to believe you are the part of you that is separate and either superior or good enough or inferior to others, that all this judgment and this identification of the separated self needs to be reconsidered. And the way in which it supports this idea of the other. You know, even Pythagoras wrote at one point that the number 2 must be evil because it is not the number 1, which is sort of silly. You'd expect Pythagoras to have it a little more together than that. But this is rooted in ancient philosophy, particularly in Persia, the Zoroastrian, we see it, where you have the concept of good and goodness, and anything that is other than would have to be bad and opposite and struggle against it like a tug of war, right? Two people in a tug of war, two forces pulling against each other, battling each other. And there have been some wonderful attempts through history to reframe this as a matter of polarities, two parts of one thing, rather than opposite forces. Now, hear me clearly. This is an important distinction. That the whole idea of the other, that comes from the confusion around individuality and being, at once all part of one thing and yet incarnated into these separated forms, believing you're the body the way some people believe they are the car they drive or the house they live in or the clothes they wear. And we do know people that believe that, right? That's who I am. God forbid that I should be this naked ape, or the way I think between my ears, or the way I feel in the center of my chest. My ethics, my values, my virtues, no, that's not who I am. Look at this car. Look at this house. I must be good and smart and successful and, more importantly, powerful, and on and on. It's all nonsense, and it's all binary, and it's all aggravated by anxiety and stress and fear. The more stressed and fearful we are, the more likely we are to see parts of one thing as opposites. And so the North Pole and the South Pole of a bar magnet, for example, do not struggle with each other. There's so many other examples of that. The the two gloves that make a pair. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that a pair of gloves is one thing. Those gloves are completely different shapes. One mirrors the other. You couldn't make one glove and use it for either hand. Your thumbs are in different places, right? They mirror each other. They're complementary. Your hands fold together beautifully because they are different, you see. And so here we have a case of opposites not opposing, but being polarities, two parts of one thing. I guess the classic example is two sides of the same coin. Do we ask the simple-minded which side of the quarter is the good side and which side is the bad side? Are heads really better than tails? Or is tails more significant, more powerful? Is that the primary side and heads the secondary side? Is one side better than the other? It's absurd on the surface of it. And yet we continue to see anything, I'm generalizing now, it's most of us most of the time, anything as different as opposite, and if it's opposite, it opposes, and if one is good, then the other must be bad, and if one is right, then the other must be wrong. And if I'm holy and righteous and I've got a sense of religion that I know to be good and true and beautiful and holy and sacred, and yours is different, then you must be evil. You must be working for the devil. And so my primary point in this class today is simply to distinguish a very important difference between opposites, like in chemistry, a base and an acid, alkaline and acid, and where they fall on the pH scale. That, I suppose, that's just off the top of my head. You could think of that as acid, as acid. You could think of that as opposites. Okay. Or sports. There's a lot of it in sports. We see it in war, for example. We see it in politics. But then to carry it over in religion, I mean, we have Christians killing each other around the world because you love Jesus differently than I love Jesus. And if you don't love Jesus the right way, I'm going to prove how much I love Jesus, and Jesus is on my side by killing you. And we see that in Ireland as an example. But how different is it when it spills over into other religions, Muslims and Hindus, or Muslims and Jews, or Christians and Jews, the fascists, the anti-Semitic fascists, and just goes on and on. You're different, therefore there must be opposite. And more often than not, it's a matter of polarity, not opposition. Two parts of one thing, the way your left hand meets your right hand. Polarities, like North and South Pole on a bar magnet. You cannot have a North Pole without a South Pole. You can't have a yin without the yang, and the Taoism symbol is a great example where the black and white are attributed to two sides of that Tao symbol, but they curve. There's a sine wave, a vibration of energy that goes through the center of that. And then there's dots of the opposite in each, suggesting there is no 100% black or 100% white. The pendulum can never swing so far to one side that it's not eventually drawn back toward the center, you see. So it's about balance in Taoism and harmony. And yes, there is some dualism here, but it's not an exclusive opposition. And it's so important to understand that when we look at good and bad, at right and wrong, at holy and evil. All right. Now, when we use light and shadow, it's such a great example. Certainly, darkness exists. Darkness exists as the absence of light. Shadow is slightly different. Shadow is a quality of light. You could say, well, the shadow is darkness. Yeah, but it's cast by the light. Darkness is a void. It exists as a complete absence of light. But shadow is cast by the light. And the shadow has form. It has a shape. It has a size. It has a depth. It is, of course, grossly distorted and exaggerated. But nevertheless, the shadow is a function of the light. And it's necessary. This is the point. The shadow is necessary for the light to reveal anything to you. If we all had only pure light with no shadow, you couldn't see anything. The contrast is essential. Any artist or photographer will tell you that once they begin to recognize that what they're working with is light, and they want to create some depth of field. And that's what shadow does. It helps to define things. So shadow plays a very necessary and important role with light. Is it possible that wrong plays that role in contrasting right, and that evil plays that role in allowing us to recognize goodness? And instead of this ancient Zoroastrian model of good and evil fighting against each other, could we begin to see good and evil as working together as part of the same thing? Now, this is a universe of energy. This is a universe, we can call it spirit. It's the same thing. Energy is spirit, spirit is energy. So if a metaphysical or religious or philosophical person says, all this matter, all this material form is simply an outpicturing or a manifestation of energy, of spirit. The religious person would say spirit. So God created the material universe. The spirit created all this solid stuff, the physical universe, the stars, the galaxies, the interstellar gases, the nebulae, the asteroids, the planets, the stars. Did I say stars? And all of the elements of the periodic table that are made inside stars become available as the stars explode. In the beginning, before stars start exploding, all you have is helium and hydrogen. That's pretty much it. Well, Einstein said the same thing, that energy equals mass at the speed of light squared. E equals mc squared. E equals m. Energy equals this material stuff. It's the same principle, don't you see? Einstein did. He was quite the mystic. He just didn't go on about it very much. There are a few little hints that he understood that the parallel of everything, material, seemingly solid, is really only energy, and that the relationship of matter to energy, or the material world to spirit, is like ice to water. Ice is solid water, or we could say water vapor. These are states. Water, whether it's vapor or liquid or solid ice, is still water. It's still chemically the same molecule, right? H2O. But it comes in different states. That's all material is. So spirit and matter work together. They're, excuse me, spirit and matter are two forms of the same thing. Why can't holy and evil be two forms of the same thing? Is that why God tolerates the devil? Is that why he put Satan in charge of running hell? Is Satan really the CEO? Is Satan, Lucifer, whatever name you have for this personification of evil, this little guy in the red underwear with the pitchfork and the horns, modeled after the Greek or Roman god Pan, and the lover of life? That's That's really who Satan is modeled after. It's Pan. Seems to me if the devil had any agency or independence, that hell would be a festival of depravity, right? All the vices would be celebrated and none of the virtues. But instead, we're told by organized religion that hell is a place of eternal damnation. And that if you don't qualify for heaven, you go to hell. Catholics had this in-between place for a while, purgatory, but they gave up on that for some reason. Purgatory, you would burn for a while and then get purified and then released, I guess. They dropped that in the 60s. But we're told by the fire and brimstone preacher that it's eternal damnation, which means the devil works for God. He's running hell according to the rules that God sets down. So he apparently is not independent. He's working for God. Ask a Christian about this. Do it respectfully and with kindness, because they're going to freak out. They don't have answers for this stuff. Who's running hell? And is Satan confined to hell, or can he come and go as he pleases? Remember Flip Wilson? The devil made me do it. Does the devil do that remotely from hell? Tempt us? Cause us to be sinners? Is that done remotely from hell? Seems to me Satan gets around, and he's supposedly a fallen angel that didn't behave, and so he was put in charge of hell. I'm not sure if he's confined or if he gets to come and go as he pleases. And you chuckle while I say this. I know you're giggling. But this is serious stuff. Millions and millions of people are terrified by this whole idea that if you're a sinner, if you're tempted, if you have a negative thought, or you do something that you're later embarrassed of, that it's evidence that you're going to burn in hell. And of course, it's all attributed to Eve eating the apple and the snake tempting Eve. And then Eve said here, and then Adam ate the apple, and oh, now we're all screwed. It's all based on this binary, this dualism of good or evil rather than good and evil. You see? Of opposition rather than polarity, where the good and evil, the idea of polarity, is two parts of one thing. So I'm suggesting to you that evil is, first of all, extant as the absence of goodness in need of redemption, and that it can be refined or redeemed or uplifted, even though many evil people appear to be absolutely committed and dedicated to being corrupt and non-virtuous. And self-centered and materialistic is really where it begins. That's the core of what evil is. Just being selfish, self-centered, not caring about anybody, not recognizing the harmony, much less the unity in the universe. And then the corruption and the willingness to be arbitrary, to see the other based on how much melanin is in your skin, right? Well, I'm superior because I'm white, excuse me. Because your ancestors went north to a cold climate and you lost the melanin, that makes you superior. 2 classes in sociology and 1 in psychology, maybe a little anthropology. You can see the insecurity in white supremacy. It's a total inferiority complex. that you would have to posture and believe you're superior. And so that makes you not only superior, but the good one. And people of color are bad. Muhammad Ali talked about this once. It was hilarious. He said, "You ever notice that white cake is angel food and chocolate cake is devil's food because that's dark?" Come on, it's 2023. I think we can figure out and work in our minds and in our hearts with this distinction between polarities, two very different, seemingly opposite forms of one thing, like the poles of a bar magnet or the yin and yang of anything. Again, I keep coming back to the left hand and the right hand, which are complete opposites, and yet the way they fit together so perfectly. And there's countless forms of that. The distinction between two forms of one thing and true opposition, a tug of war, so that evil is necessary as a shadow, not darkness, but as a function of goodness, to create a contrast, to allow us to recognize where we can improve ourselves, where we can redeem ourselves, ways to get better, and then eliminate this idea of heaven or hell and see our lives, whether you're stuck on the idea of one shot or many, reincarnation, transmigration, as an evolution, as a redemption. We all have negative thoughts. We've all made mistakes. We're all sinners. That doesn't make you bad. That doesn't make you evil. If you would like to do better anyway, if you're committed to it, you just absolutely don't care, and you're fully on board with corruption, you can call that evil, but it's just a misguided soul. They still have the potential, if not in this lifetime, in another, if not in this form, in another. That's why I think reincarnation and karma makes so much sense, right? If you're evil and corrupt, how about another lifetime where you experience uh, the, the effects of that cruelty in your next lifetime, so that you sort of figure it out? That's what it takes. So I want to go to some Q&A about this, and I'm interested in your comments and would love to hear some questions about this idea of the either or, and how we can replace our thinking with an and see the appearance of opposites as polarities rather than in opposition, whether it's good and evil, good or evil, good and evil, right or wrong, being right and wrong. Remember, we've talked about subjective truth. I'm cold. It's cold in this room. No, it's not. It's hot. Well, one of you has to be wrong. No, you don't. You're both right. For you, it's cold. For you, it's hot. Oh, that's too fast. You can't drive that fast. Oh, no, that's slow. It's not slow. It's fast. Aren't you tired of it's either right or it's wrong? Isn't that exhausting? Arguing? How about just granting? Oh, you see that as fast? Well, to me, it's slow. I'd rather go faster. Is this big? No, that's a tiny one. That's not tiny. Shouldn't eat that much. Are you kidding? I could eat twice that much. It's a big portion. No, it's a small portion. So one of you is wrong? It's exhausting. And imagine living in a world Or instead of seeing all difference as opposites, God, what? No wonder we suffer if we really believe that any different is an opposite. And I know I'm right and you're different in some little way. Maybe we agree on 95% of a particular topic, but this 5% over here we disagree, and that makes you wrong because I know I'm right. And now I'm angry, and now I'm filled with hate and prone toward violence because I'm mentally and emotionally crippled by dualism, by binary thinking, and seeing polarities, the yin and yang, as opposites. Remember, you can't have a yin without a yang. You can't have a North Pole without a South Pole. When you think of energy or spirit, think of the sine wave. Waves are easy to see in water. There's a peak and a trough, right? You've never seen a wave with all peaks and no troughs, or all troughs and no peaks or crests. They are a function of each other, apparently opposite. The crest or the peak is above sea level, the trough is below sea level. There's something in the middle at sea level, but the crest is not the good part and the trough the bad part. It's necessary for energy to move. And I'll say this before we go to Melinda and your questions and your comments. When we look at the evil that is extant in the world today, if you want to call it that, the corruption, the self-centeredness, the indecency, the commitment to violence and racial superiority, the racism and the bigotry, and you see this getting big, and you're afraid that it's going to overwhelm peace and love and goodness and kindness in the world, remember what I'm saying about polarities working together. When one gets bigger, the other gets bigger. So when the news shows you all of this murder and mayhem in the world, doesn't that mean that there's more goodness in the world than ever before? If the trough of the wave is getting deeper and deeper as the winds blow stronger and the storm comes up, does that not mean the crests are getting higher and higher as well? But the news only shows you the trough, the downside, the horror of the world getting worse and worse and worse. How could that not be a function of the world getting better and better and better? It just doesn't get on the news. Good news doesn't sell. Reporters are not going to tell you about all the dogs that were not lost on a given day.
I'm sorry.
Or all the children that did not die from untimely deaths, and all the all the goodness. And sometimes they'll try to finish a newscast with a human interest story, some little happy news at the very end. But it's the nature of news to show you the bad stuff, right? Imagine a news story opening, a newscast opening with the journalist saying, here's a list of all the schools where nobody was shot today. When you get scared and overwhelmed by all the ignorance and fear and the evil and corruption in the world, just think of the wave. Think of this whole idea of polarities, not opposites, right? The negative is getting bigger because the positive is getting bigger. And the good news is, as the positive gets bigger, we become more enlightened, more aware, then we are better able to educate, to redeem, refine, to uplift. And that argument about shall all souls in the end be saved? Are they all redeemable, or are some a lost cause? I have to believe everything is redeemable. Ultimately, everything is good. All things work together for good in the long run. Now, that's a lot of material, I know, but I think you can handle it. You guys are bright. And surely that'll bring up some questions for you. So maybe some comments. So put a little note in the chat box, send it to Melinda. And we have just under 20 minutes here, if we need it, to explore some of these comments and questions. So, Mindy, is anybody up with a comment already?
Yep, Jack had something to say. I'll read it. Jack, you chime in if you want to. He wanted to comment about Job, one of the great stories about the devil.
Okay. Why don't you do that?
Well, you asked about whether Satan was confined to hell or got to move around a bit.
Yeah.
I would certainly say he moves around quite a bit.
Yeah.
But in the story of Job, he is able to move freely into the court of the heavenly king, which was always considered to be the very highest heaven, and go right up to God and have a friendly conversation in which God brags about his servant Job, and they proceed to make bets. Satan acts as kind of a sort of a prosecuting attorney, pointing out the weaknesses potentially of Job, and God gives him permission to first attack Job's family and his wealth, kill his children, and that's not enough. Job keeps worshiping God, and so he goes further and further, and eventually makes him like horribly ill. And Job's friends try to get him to turn on God, and finally his wife joins in and tells him to curse God and die. So Job just doesn't know what he's done wrong. He's doesn't think he has done anything wrong, and finally God comes into the conversation and starts bragging about how big and powerful he is compared to Job. Job wasn't there when God created all the monsters. And so Jung has a wonderful view of this and says that Job actually realizes in this that maybe God has some flaws because he's been such a jerk, but Job doesn't say anything about it. And further, that God realizes, or Jehovah, this version of the divine,
Yahweh.
that maybe he's gone a bit far, and maybe he doesn't really understand. And then the incarnation of the Logos, the incarnation of God, is God deciding not to be just sort of on the outside commanding everything, including good and evil, but experiencing what humans experience, sort of getting into the thick of it. And I think part of the human problem of evil is that we, instead of being human and understanding that all humans are in the thick of it and experiencing great difficulty, we can sort of get on the outside, and I know what is absolutely good and I know what is absolutely evil. And of course, enjoying the wonder of being right. The righteousness of being right is the greatest drug of all, it seems like. But the reality is that it's much more confusing and it's much more difficult, and we're all involved in it. And I think when we have the compassion of understanding our own suffering and understanding other people's suffering, we're at least kinder. And I don't think good and evil is quite such a problem when we're kind. But it often becomes a huge problem when we have these very abstract sense of righteousness and right, and and even worse in a sense, identifying with being right. Because when you're right, you can do every evil. You can, every evil is okay
That's
if
that
you're
bingo.
going to bring about paradise. So what if
Yes.
you kill 100 million people?
God, that's such a heavy point. That's the problem with being self-righteous and superior. And I already have God on my side. I'm already saved. So what? I can murder this guy if I want because I'm saved, and all I got to do is tell Jesus I'm sorry, and then I'm free to kill again. It's a very weak philosophy, and binaryism, false dichotomies, duality, either or mentality, whatever we want to call it, is just flawed. It's not rich enough to handle the complexities of life. When you talk about Satan being free to come and go, he of course appears to Jesus when he's in the desert, right?
Yeah.
And as I remember, he tempts him and he says, essentially, if you're the king of the Jews, and how about a palace? Why don't you get yourself uh, a stable of fine Arabian horses and some decent clothes, and get yourself some shoes. What's this walking around barefoot stuff all the time? And act like a king, you know, be more materialistic. Get some girls. How about some girls? What the hell? What kind of king are you? And Christ says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Well, we all have that voice in our head, right? That voice of corruption that says, "The hell with it." You know, do what you want to do. Doesn't matter who. It's none of your business if other people are hurt. And it's a very creative and clever voice. The voice of the jiva nature of the ego. It will dress up like the soul while acting in such non-spiritual ways, such materialistic and, for lack of a better word, satanic ways. Why that's not just seen by religious fundamentalists as the nature of the ego self, uh, why that has to be personified, I, I don't understand. Nobody believes that Santa Claus is a real guy at living in the North Pole in a red suit and reindeer and all of that. But we cherish the spirit of Christmas. We know the spirit of Christmas is real. We feel the magic every year, unless we struggle to avoid it. If we allow ourselves to get in the spirit of giving, Christian or not, magic, the magic of Christmas is obvious. So that part is real, but the Santa Claus part, that's for children. And I don't know why we have to lie to children. Just at one point say, no, no, no. Santa is a personification. He's like a spirit, like a good ghost, and he represents the giving. I don't know why this is so hard for parents, and the children feel lied to and betrayed. And the same thing with the damn Easter bunny. What does that have to do with the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ? And rabbits don't lay eggs, and we're just confusing the children. And guy called me on the radio once years ago. I was at KLSX in the early 90s, and he said, why don't you believe in the devil? Something I had said caused him to call and ask the question. And I said, without actually thinking, I probably wouldn't have been so blunt, but I didn't even think it, just off the top of my head. I said, because I'm educated. I went to college. I mean, Do you believe in the tooth fairy? What's the difference? And there was this long pause. He had nothing to offer. Why can we know the tooth fairy is a myth, that Santa Claus is a wonderful tradition of the spirit of Christmas, but not real? And yet so many of these, not just Christians, there's many people that believe in the personification of evil. I heard a Buddhist teacher going on about evil and hell. I didn't know until I heard this lecture that Buddhists believe in hell. But to a Buddhist, hell is a condition that passes. It's not eternal damnation. But I think various Hindus, and I'm quite sure that Muslims believe in a hell as a destination, as a place. And again, evil as that which opposes goodness rather than working together as polarities. So, anything else,
somebody
Jack?
said, if there's not a devil, then it's us.
Exactly, it is. It is us. There's that great line in the Oh God movie with George Burns and John Denver, where George Burns appears as God to John Denver in a restroom. And John Denver, of course, is gobsmacked. He doesn't know what to make of this. And he wouldn't even believe it, except God keeps appearing and disappearing, and nobody else seems to be able to see him. So John Denver quizzes him, and at one point says, wait a minute, if you're a kind and loving God, that classic question, why is there so much suffering in the world? Why do you allow this misery? And with that incredible timing that George Burns had, he pauses just long enough, and then he says, why do I allow it? You see? And that's such a profound insight into the role of evil and corruption and indecency in the world. It's not why does God create it, but why do you and I allow it? Why do we allow 750,000 people in America to sleep on the streets while we spend $800 billion a year on war? Why do we allow that? Why is infant mortality in the United States put us 35th in the world, 34 other nations? Your baby has a better chance of living than the United States. Why do we allow that? And while there are many things that are beyond our control, there's a lot more that we could do if we took responsibility and stopped holding God and the devil responsible. It's the ultimate victim game, it seems to me. And it's not sacrilegious to suggest that God emanates itself in the world as all things, rocks and rivers and wind and minerals and plants and animals and human beings and angels and devas and whatever you got, I don't know, but how could anything exist that's not of the one source? So this whole struggle of there's something here that's not divine, there's something here that's struggling against it. And as you say in Job, God goes to Vegas with the devil, and we won't even get into Cain and Abel, right? That's some pretty wicked stuff. And where in the Bible does it say slavery is wrong? There's a lot of wonderful stuff in that set of books called the Bible, but there's a lot that's missing there as well. Thanks, Jack.
Yes.
Mindy, anybody else?
No, doesn't seem so. I just had a funny thought when you were talking about hell as is it a destination? As You know, heaven actually has dimensions. I'm sure you're aware of that. I don't remember where it was in the Old Testament. I don't know it that well, but that it has actual physical dimensions.
Well, part of the confusion about this, again, depending on which Christian denomination you talk to, is this belief that Christ took his meat body with him when he ascended to heaven, and that you're going to need your meat body. Even though Christ was very clear in saying, no, God is not flesh and blood. Heaven is not a material plane. God is spirit and energy, like the warmth of the sun or the wind. It's a spirit.
I don't
Spirit.
mean to interrupt you. You'll have to forgive me. Iris did pop up with a comment, and it's an interesting comment.
Good. Well, let me just finish this thought. So Christ is real clear about the fact that spirit or energy is not matter, and yet this idea that he ascended and took that meat body with him causes many Christians to believe that they should not be cremated. And all of this left behind literature of the born agains and the evangelicals, you can't be cremated, you're going to need that body. Oh, and if you lose an arm or a leg to amputation, that you're in big trouble now. Um, just I just don't understand, or a refusal, for that matter, to believe in evolution, when all you got to do is spend a couple of weeks breeding fruit flies, or just watch the way the COVID epidemic evolved. Those different variants, that's COVID evolving. it's trying to outwit you. It said, "Oh, you've got a vaccination. Well, we're going to fool you." Or the way rats have become immune to rat poison, and bacteria resist antibiotics. Evolution is everywhere. Why would you deny the obvious? And yet, it's very, very frustrating. Let me go to Iris. You want to tell me what she had to say?
Well, also a couple of kind of long comments, and since time is short, I'm going to truncate them. Nobody is a good or bad person. Our actions are both beneficial and harmful. Satan is a mind creation. We can only use and blame him for harmful actions. That's the first point. Her second one is interesting too. For me, reincarnation has to do with the transference of chemical elements that make us up to create a new body. But I think what she means is you can't just take those chemicals and shake them up and create a person. Do you agree, Michael? I think that was the gist of it.
Well, by chemical, I'm wondering whether we're talking about the physical chemical.
I think she meant the elements, actually. I think.
That's a spin on transmigration or reincarnation that I'd want to know more from her about. And Iris, since it's 12:30 and I want to close the class, let's revisit that next week. Bring it up. Our Q&As are not limited to the topic of that particular week. So if you want to bring that up again, reincarnation, karma is always a great topic, very important topic in metaphysics, and I'd be happy to listen to what you have to say about that. The first comment, I totally support and agree with. I think is well said. With that, thank you very much for being here and letting me spout. I think it's a wonderful, enlightening point of what's the word I'm looking for, of being able to relax and really just enjoy life when you understand that differences are not opposites, except in the most rare situations, that in virtually all cases, it is much more accurate to see the appearance of opposites as polarities, as two dissimilar parts of one thing, and the role that they play. And work with the crust and the trough, since energy has frequency and amplitude. And that vibration, everything is energy, energy vibrates. Everything has frequency and amplitude. And that yin and that yang, that crust and that trough that's visible in water, will help you understand why there cannot be one without the other. The crust has to have the trough. The North Pole of the magnet has to have a South Pole. And one is not right and the other wrong. One is not good and the other evil. And shadow, the idea that evil exists, is the absence of goodness, not an opposing force. Shadow plays a role. It's a function of, a quality of the light. They work together. I think there's a lot here for us to ponder and to reflect upon. And I really appreciate you being here today. I'd like to encourage you all to unmute and say your goodbyes and thank yous to each other. And I wish you the best. Aloha, namaste, and salam.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Done.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks,
Have a
Jack.
great week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Take care,
Michael.
everyone.
All the best.